It is my pleasure to present to you, Ellen Kay, the degree Doctor of Letters, honoris causa, with all the rights and privileges appertaining hereto.
Thank you so much. You know, honorary degrees are nice, but the real ones that you've earned today are much nicer, so let me congratulate you. Commencement talks are usually full of advice, but there is such a wide diversity of human styles that each person really needs something special. There's a great scene in the movie City Slickers where Billy Crystal plays a guy in a midlife crisis who goes on a cattle drive to find himself. Jack Palance is the old cowboy who says, "You city folks just don't get it. The secret of life is just one thing." And Billy Crystal says, "What is it? What is it?" And the old cowboy said, "That's what you have to find out." So I'm going to avoid giving advice in this talk. There are even jokes about commencement. Doonesbury did a Sunday comic about it. President Bush thought it would be funny to point out that one can go far in the U.S. with a C average. In a commencement a few weeks ago, he said, literally, "Look what I've accomplished with my fluency in language and grammar." What a role model. But Mr. Bush's remarks do point up the enormous distinction between just getting a degree and getting a real education. The shocking start of real education happens when you realize that you not only don't know very much compared to the good stuff that's known, but that what you do know is known in a very weak way. And the problem with starting on this path of education is this doesn't change as you get better educated. The more you learn, the more you realize you don't know, and the more you realize you understand it in a weak way. People say, "But I want to know everything, and I want to be absolutely sure of it." A lot of people do this by living inside their heads with stories they choose to believe in. But this uses an ancient version of know that really means the same as believe, and it misses most of the important ideas. About 400 years ago, a new way of living outside of our heads a little bit was invented. Science changed the meaning of know so drastically that it would have been better if a new word had been coined. We still use know. Science fiction writer Robert Heinlein gave us a Martian word for this new way of knowing, called it grok. In part, grok means trying to understand things in a way that minimizes our human genetic and cultural biases. This is known a long time ago. The Talmud says we see things not as they are, but as we are. Grok means to try to see things not as we are, but from stronger points of view. The most critical ideas of humanity have happened when somebody has realized that the world is not as it seems, that most of the important stuff is quite invisible to our nervous system and belief structures. This is something you know about because making the invisible a little more visible is what artists have always tried to do. And grokking became the newest of the arts. It was one of the great art forms of the last century. Another early part of this new way of thinking happened when democratic republics like ours were invented that tried to take into account our biases and prejudices. In 18th century America, the title of Tom Paine's Common Sense was a play on words because it was really an argument against common sense ideas about governments. For example, having a king in those days seemed quite natural. It was a natural extension of having a father be the head of a family. But Paine said, instead of having the king be the law, let us have the law be the king. And he meant that people can invent a form of government that is better for most people than what seems natural. Tom Paine really meant uncommon sense. Thomas Jefferson, in a letter in 1820, said, "I know of no safe depository of the ultimate powers of the society but the people themselves. And if we think them not enlightened enough to exercise their control with a wholesome discretion, the remedy is not to take it from them, but to inform their discretion by education." This is what education in America really means. Inform their discretion by education means not helping Americans learn a job or facts, but helping them learn to grok. A few years back, my wife, Bonnie McBird, who incidentally was the original writer of the movie Tron, that's how we met. She had a nice argument with Vice President Al Gore over the haves and have-nots. He was worried about the digital divide in the United States, but she pointed out that most of the important knowledge of the world was still in books and available in free public libraries. She said that the real have and have-nots are those who have or have not the discretion to make use of these free resources. The real start of education is to gain that discretion. A survey a few years ago indicated that only about 20% of American adults today can read and understand this simply written pamphlet, Common Sense, by Tom Paine. And this includes many college graduates. So the safe repository of the ultimate powers of society is not so safe these days. Our main job as adults, now usually I found that the most popular advice in a commencement talk was to follow your bliss or do what you really love and so forth. And that is actually good advice, but it's too individual. It's too incognizant of the fact that we live in a society. So our main job as adults, especially as college graduates, is to try to help all of the children of the world grow up to think better, meaning grok better, than we do. And we who are involved in the new media can make a big difference here. That's you. Nicholas Negroponte and I, Nicholas is the founder of the Media Lab at MIT, he and I are involved in a serious project underway right now to make and distribute an under $100 laptop computer for all of the children in the world. That is multiple billions of children. This is possible to do. McLuhan pointed out that we shape media, but then the media turn around and reshape us. So what kind of content will you make for this new medium? Nicholas and I are making the machine, but it's up to you to make the content. What kind of content will you make for the children of the world? Now, 30 years ago, I attended a conference on mind and body held at the Zen Center in California. The monks would often clasp their hands together and pause for a moment. I eventually worked up the courage to ask them why they did this. They said, Buddhists believe that the world of the senses is an illusion which most of the time we have to pretend is real, like when we're walking into a path of a bus. Maybe an illusion, but we better get out of the way. But during the day, there are occasions at a meal, starting to do work, at a ceremony like this, where we pause for a moment to reflect that we are incredibly finite and limited beings. and reality is much larger than we can take in at any one time. I think this is a wonderful practice, to pause several times a day and think for a second about all of the things we aren't thinking about. So congratulations again, and thank you very much for pausing to grok the real significance of this day.